How are yields shaping up across Ohio as the harvest comes in? Well, it's been almost a month since the federal government shut down, which means we haven't seen yield estimates or crop progress reports in some time. Kevin McNew joins us on the Ohio AgNet. He's with Quantum Hedging and here to help us fill in the information gap when it comes to harvest data right here in the Buckeye State. Kevin, welcome. Good to see you.
Thanks for having me, Ty. Glad to be here.
You're leading the charge at Quantum Hedging with something called Harvest Yield Analytics Platform. For those who may not be familiar, let's start right there. Walk us through what Harvest Yield Analytics is and how it works.
Yeah, so it's an opportune time to be showcasing this. We've been doing this for 6 years. What it really is, Ty, is looking at commercial seed plot data that comes off every harvest season. This is from the major seed brands. They all do their yield plots and they publicize them. And so we've been collecting that data since late 2019 and into this decade, 2020. And so we've been doing this for now 6, 7 years, and what I can tell you is that we're using this not as a precise estimate of what yields will be, because this data is noisy. It's a sample of farms. It's a selective sample, and statisticians would probably say it's not a representative sample of all farms. But the way we use it is to really look at how seed plot data yields from seed plots have changed from one year to the next. And then we look at those changes and say, do those match what USDA says is going to be the yield change? And so in doing this over the years, what I can tell your listeners is that, we feel pretty confident that it shows it when we see really problem areas or really good areas around the country, it helps us find those. And so, for example, in 2020, a good example, that growing season was really challenging. We had a start of a great season. It looked really good, sort of like this year. And then at the end of the season, it got dry. We had a derecho that came through and wiped out a lot of crop in Iowa and parts of Minnesota and Illinois. And so, that yield data that we're looking at, these commercial seed plots, helped us catch that. This year, we're seeing some interesting things, Ty, and I'm happy to kind of share with the listeners what we're seeing.
Let's start with the Corn Belt as a whole, because as we know, the markets affect farmers here in Ohio because of what's happening out in Iowa and Minnesota and the Dakotas. What are we seeing as far as the Midwest is concerned? Crop yields, corn, soybeans this year compared to, let's say, last year?
Yeah, so let's start with corn first of all. When we go back to August, and the USDA's kind of first official survey-based estimate of yields, they put a 188 yield number out into the trade as their forecast. And that was wild. That was, we've never even broached 180 on a national yield. Last year we were 179. And, we know we're kind of pushing trend at 182, 183, but to come out at 188 was really aggressive. They did back off before they went silent in September. Their September estimate was 186. And so they did come down. And what I can tell you is that we've been watching these data flow in since September, and it's never matched that high yield expectation from USDA. What we're seeing very strongly is problems in Iowa. Let me start there. The big state is not going to meet, in our opinion, the really lofty goal that USDA has targeted for Iowa. Iowa is supposed to have a record yield, massive record yield, 219, which is really, really high for Iowa. Their previous record was like 208. And so, this is a big, big jump. We're not seeing it in the data. Our data is suggesting that Iowa yields are actually looking worse than last year, not 8 bushel an acre better than last year. So that's an alarming result. And we've seen this all season long, from the start of the season to, our data is about halfway through. We've still got a lot more data to chew through, but I can tell you that Iowa feels pretty locked in terms of the amount of data we've seen, the amount of results. It's pretty wide scoping. Geographically in Iowa, it's more the eastern half. As you get closer to, call it northwest Iowa into southwest Minnesota, then you start to see yields really turn around, really look strong. But overall, Iowa is off from last year by a fairly large margin. So I think Iowa is going to have to come down in the U.S. or in the USDA's next forecast. Overall, U.S. yields, we think they're going to be closer to 180 than 186. Quite a bit off from the 186 number where we have been silently on hold since September 11th, and the USDA went silent. So that's where we're at with corn.
Now,
Beans,
soybeans, yeah, beans have been in the news, right?
yeah,
Growing a lot of
uh,
beans. There's nowhere for them to go. But how are we doing on
right.
the soybean side?
So beans a different story. Very good bean crop coming out as far as we've seen, and I think I don't have any reason to doubt USDA's U.S. estimate for beans, which is around 53 bushels. We see numbers that are indicative of that. Iowa's is pretty good, maybe not as high as what the USDA has, but overall, I don't see any huge outliers in soybeans for the U.S. to doubt a 53 number from USDA. For Ohio, it's a good year. Is it a great year? Is it a record year? Probably not. 23 was a record year for Ohio farmers. We're going to fall a little bit short of those numbers on both corn and beans, but still a reasonably good year in terms of yield for Ohio. We think Ohio yields will probably be 190 for corn, which is off from 194 estimate from USDA. And for beans, we think beans will be about 55, just a slight lower number than 56 from USDA. That compares to 198, which was a corn yield high for Ohio in 2023, and then 58 in 23 for beans. So not record yields for Ohio farmers, but good solid yields, I think, is what we're going to see as we wrap up this harvest season.
How deep into the state can you get? Can you look at quadrants of the state and see which might be doing better than others as far as
Yeah,
the yields are concerned?
unfortunately, Ohio, it's a later growing season, and therefore we don't have as much data in. But I can tell you, I sent you our maps this morning. Viewers, if you go to our website, quantum-hedging.com, you'll see our maps online, and you'll see that the counties in all across the country where things are looking good or not looking good. Eastern half of Ohio generally better than the western. I'm sorry, let me take that back. Eastern half a little worse than the western half. So the better yields are probably as you move west. And by better, I mean better compared to last year. So yields compared to last year are stacking up a little better in the west than they are in the east. But still, it's a little hard to call out strong geographical differences right now.
There are going to be people that wonder how these numbers compare to USDA. And you have several years now where you get to the end of the year and you're able to look at what you think is going to happen and what USDA said happened. How close are
Yeah.
we?
Last year was a bit of a curveball for us. I'll be honest. I always want to tell people, data and analytics can help you, but sometimes it's not perfect. It's, like I said, this is an indicator and not a precise estimate because of the selection bias that exists in this data. And so, last year we were pretty convinced that yields needed to come down, and they did come down at the very last report in January, not in the November report, but in the very last report in January. Some of the states, we didn't see some of the problems in the states from our seed plot data like USDA did. So there is some slop in here, Ty. I don't want people to think that, we're definitively right, but I do feel fairly confident that these 186 number for corn needs to come down. And we're hearing this being validated from a lot of the people we're in contact with. Pro Farmer had a very interesting yield survey they did a few weeks back. I will say, they really called out Ohio for some subpar yields. I scratch my head about that a little bit. I don't see that in my data. So I'll be kind of waiting to see, like everyone else, is Ohio going to be bad, like maybe Pro Farmer says, or is it going to be a little more normal, like our seed plot data saying? So still a lot of uncertainty here, but yeah, we're glad that yields are looking fairly good, and certainly the trade news over the weekend is a little silver bullet of goodness that we're excited about for farmers.
Kevin McNew with Quantum Hedging, our guest, giving us something to chew on as we continue in those combines and corn and soybeans fields throughout Ohio and the Midwest. Really appreciate your time. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ty.